Have you been wondering if you have narcissistic parents or one parent, or your research might have left you wondering if in fact you did grow up in the healthy-ish environment you thought you did? You might have been living in the shadow of your siblings, or perhaps you saw yourself as the most popular child, aware that your siblings were being treated differently. Maybe you spent most of your life walking on eggshells, never living the life that you were born to live. This video is for educational purposes only. It is not a diagnostic tool. Hello, welcome to the Divorce Sanctuary. I'm Elizabeth, author of Finding Lily and the A to Z of emotional abuse. On this channel, I talk about healing from emotional abuse and divorcing emotionally from the abuser. I want to remind you that love should be unconditional, and divorcing emotionally and healing the original wound is life-changing. I want to help you understand and process what's actually happening inside you and help you discover the best tools to heal on a deeper level, becoming the best version of yourself. If you're new to the channel, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're returning, welcome back and thank you. And thank you so much for your support, for all my new subscribers over the last few months. It's just amazing. Thank you. Have you been wondering if you were brought up in a healthy family dynamic? Have you wondered why you weren't good enough? What's more you needed to do to get the attention or approval from one or both parents? Perhaps you were the scapegoat, blamed for everything your siblings did. In this video, I will give you 7 traits of the narcissistic parents. There are more. This isn't a diagnostic tool. I also have included some red flags to family dysfunction. And if you stay to the end, I'm going to share some tools with you to help you understand and process what's happened and help you heal on a deeper level. And if you have experienced anything else and you think that might be helpful to others, then please add it in the comments below. The majority of the work that I do is finding out where the abuse started. There was a reason you ended up in a relationship that others would have walked away from or would not have attracted in the first place. When we think about families, we might see them as a strong unit, taking care and supporting each member, each being equal and deserving. A mother and a father who love each other and support each other's decisions and dreams, who encourage and are each other's greatest fans. But this isn't always the case. And when this occurs, it causes trauma, much like a physical wound, but this one goes unnoticed. And I call this the original wound. It is the original wound that makes the abuse in our adult relationships feel okay. We might have been told in a crucial time that we weren't enough. We might have witnessed abuse to a parent. We might have been treated in a way where we were not seen or heard. We may have noticed that we were treated differently to our siblings. And when we got older, you may notice that other family units don't behave in the same way. Or you might have attracted friendships where your friends had poor relationships with a parent. I'm going to share with you 7 traits of the narcissistic dynamic. And at the end, I'm going to share with you a few tools that can help you start your journey to recovery. I want to help you understand and process what's happened so that you can heal on a deeper level. I don't actually like labels. One of the reasons is that the abusive person doesn't see there's anything wrong with their behaviour, and they shift the blame. They will never see this as their fault. You will continue to be looking at quizzes or lists or asking if they are a narcissist, or perhaps they fit the sociopath role, or maybe you're looking at the cluster B and they fit in there. This shifts the focus onto them, and it should be on you and your healing. The emotional abuser experienced their own trauma, and they've internalized it, and they made a decision to protect themselves at all costs. Your childhood might have been difficult. You may have experienced parents who were self-absorbed and really had children as one of the natural thing that people do when they get married. They may have provided a roof over your head and fed you, but they were neglectful in other ways. They might not have been available or present in your life, or they might have micromanaged you, every part of your existence, to the point where you were suffocated. So one thing you might have noticed is that they were two-faced. They wore a different mask out in public to the one that behind closed doors. You may have experienced this in other relationships, and now you're realizing one or both parents behave like this. It's like when the camera stops rolling, they stop acting. The person they project in public isn't the person you go home with. They become cruel or angry. Perhaps both. In public, Adam can do no wrong. He is the perfect child until he walks in the door at home and his behaviour showed up his parents or embarrassed them. Their boundaries are non-existent. They don't explain the rules, and if they did, they would change them to suit their needs anyway. They control the lives of their children. They're claiming what they do is for the best. But did it really feel like in your best interests? Or was it more for your parents? They control the friendships and who the child is in contact with. The third one is their gift giving comes with strings attached. You should be grateful for the gift that you didn't want and what the parent had to give up to get it. They also gift to gain attention. It's the big gesture. Or they give gifts over attention, so they will show love by expensive gifts. So that's in their eyes. This isn't love. Children need to be seen. They need to feel safe. And their entitlement means that they believe they should have the best children, and they make statements like, everything I've done for you and this is how you repay me. Everything about this dynamic is conditional. The children hide dysfunction. So if the children look good, the family looks good. The adults might play happy families in a similar way that they did as children, perhaps dressing their children up as they did their dolls, presenting a picture of the perfect family. Children learn from a young age to predict the mood of the home, and they may disappear to protect themselves, or they may protect their other siblings in the family unit. The older children, having been around the abusive parent a lot longer, may recognise when the atmosphere changes. They may be allocated different roles, or they may have opted themselves. So there's scapegoat, the invisible child, and the golden child. The role of the scapegoat is given to one child, which means it's open for the family mobbing. Because we are programmed from an early age, it means that the siblings of the scapegoat will understand their role and they will partake in the blaming. They may even see it as a way of keeping themselves out of trouble with the parent. Knowing it doesn't matter what they do, they will never receive punishment for their actions. The golden child is as much a victim as the scapegoat. They are the best child in the eyes of the abusive parent. They make the family unit look good. The child might excel in sport or academically. Or it might be the beauty pageant contestant. And through association, the parent is able to brag about their achievements, which gains them their supply. And there's the invisible child. And as with the other roles, the invisible child is another victim in this family dynamic. They are as much, if not more, a victim than the golden child and the scapegoat. The invisible child is the neglected child who fades into the background without an official role. They're not singled out like the scapegoat for a negative attention by the parent. They're just ignored. Narcissistic parents control everything is number 5. Their life is created to play out an illusion. The lives of their children might be created to live a life the parents wanted, forcing their hopes and dreams upon them. The parents control what they're allowed to do and who they're allowed to be friends with. Both or one parent live in a fantasy world. There is nothing wrong with wanting your children to have a better life than you had. But where it becomes unhealthy is when a child isn't living the life that they want to live. They're living out their parents' missed opportunities. This is the father who didn't make the football team, but forces his son or daughter to play when they have no interest or even hate the game. Or the mother whose child is dressed head to toe in designer clothes with frills and bows, when really what they want to be doing is being in their old clothes, digging in mud or climbing trees. When they get older, this is the creative person who wants to work with their hands, but becomes a doctor or an accountant to make a parent happy. They play victim is number 6, manipulating the emotions of their children using tactics like triangulation, creating jealousy and insecurity, and it's even used for narcissistic supply. Highly critical of anyone that presents a threat to their fragile self. And each situation becomes their crutch. They pull out every time. Well, this is what happened to me, or my parents thought it was good enough for me, so it's good enough for you. They play the victim in every situation. It wasn't something they did, it was something that happened to them. Number 7 is jealousy. Parents allow no boundaries of their children. They need to know what they're doing, who they're playing with, who their friends are, and they even control these relationships, believing their children are easily led or influenced. The parent might be in competition with their children for the attention and affection of their partner. And when the children become adults, they might flirt with their partners, behaving inappropriately towards them. They might be jealous of the children's achievements or looks. It's the attractive younger child versus the aging parent. They might ridicule and shame. This type of abuse and family dynamic impacts both sons and daughters. They might repeat the patterns, believing this is how you treat people, or they find themselves in relationships with abusers. They might believe they're not good enough and walk around with a wound of shame. You might recognize yourself as the scapegoat, believing that you weren't good enough, but in reality, you were the biggest threat to the dynamics of the family. You might recognize yourself as the golden child, living under the threat that if you didn't supply the attention, you would lose your place and be shoved off the pedestal. And you've seen what's happened to the unfavored child or children. You might recognize yourself as the invisible child. I'm just going to recap before I share with you some tools that may help you. The emotionally abusive or toxic or controlling parent expects everything to be done their way. And if that doesn't happen, they need someone to take the blame. Nothing will ever be their fault, and they blame shift to protect their fragile sense of self. They see themselves as someone with authority, and they don't see their behaviour as controlling. Their children are trained from birth to enable their behaviour, hide the dysfunction. Their love is conditional, but the reality is they don't know how to love. Their life is conditional. Everything has a value. It's contractual. They use manipulation to get what they want. Any signs of empathy are really based on how this is going to affect them or how they will look. They are unpredictable and emotionally volatile. They hold grudges and play the victim. They are jealous and they don't allow their children safe boundaries. Having parents who are high up on the narcissistic spectrum has the potential to create lasting trauma in a child's life. Children are sponges. They see, hear, feel everything, and they believe this is how you treat people or you should be treated. The adult children may never feel good enough, but please remember, this isn't your fault. You were good enough. It's the parents that aren't good enough. However, for them to admit it shows weakness and fragility. They probably experienced something similar in childhood, but it doesn't make it right. It might make it easier to understand. It also doesn't mean that you have to continue to play the role in their illusion. As an adult, you can look back and think, my parent experienced this as a child, so I understand why they behaved in a way or the way that they did. It doesn't make what happened okay. We all have the ability to choose. Do we go left or do we go right? At some point, you made a decision not to repeat the patterns. Was that an internal decision through what you experienced? You might have witnessed your father being cruel to your mother and your mother then not being able to be there for you. Or it could have been the other way round. How do you manage the relationships now? You could go no contact with the family, or once you realise the patterns, you can learn to manage and set boundaries. You may have other caregivers within your family unit who did take care of you or saw you or your needs. Therefore, you might not want to cut yourself off from family gatherings. You've possibly been suffocated emotionally, experienced being shamed and punished, and you probably took the blame for everybody else's mistakes. Actually, there's possibly not a lot you haven't experienced. So what you can do is start looking at the patterns of the unit and seeing if you can recognize anything. When this happens, see what reaction you get, what you notice, how people behave when you do certain things. Were they critical when you said something? Listen to the voices in your head. Listen to how the sentences are constructed. And if you listen hard enough, you will hear the voices behind the beliefs. I will put a link to my course, It Stops Here, It Stops Now, below. It has an exercise in there to specifically help you with this. When you can see the patterns and situations that take place, you can learn to maneuver yourself out of the line of fire from that parent. You might notice someone you need to speak to, or you can make an excuse to go to the toilet. If you are sat near them at a table, you can engage in conversations with other people around you. Ignore their comments and don't give them the reaction that they're looking for. You can come off social media on days around Mother's Day, Father's Day, Christmas or Easter, where there are gatherings or photos of gatherings of perfect families that are triggering you. And then, are there things that you wanted to do but you weren't allowed to do as a child? And my workshop, This Stops Here, This Stops Now, also has an exercise in there that covers this. Listen to those internal critics. Whose voice is it? And then challenge those statements, asking, are they true? If you found this video helpful in some way, please like, share and subscribe. It really helps with getting the message out and other people finding the channel. I will also link in the description box below the course or the workshop that I was talking about. It Stops Here, It Stops Now. There's so many techniques in there that will help you to ground, refocus, stop rumination and have these really important conversations that we need to be having, honest conversations with ourselves. But it also gives you the tools to challenge some of the beliefs that you were given in childhood, those crucial years of between birth and 8 years old, where everything we believe when we live in this theta state, we take on as the truth. And that includes what we believe about ourselves. Please don't forget to share any comments that you have on the video below, and I'm sending you loads and loads of love.